Yama, good morning. Welcome to the launch of the 2025 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Social Justice Report. My name is Lyndon Coombs. I'm a Yuwalero man from northwest New South Wales. I'm also the director of the Jumbunna Institute for Indigenous Education and Research at the University of Technology, Sydney, and I'll be the MC for today. So, a bit of housekeeping before we begin. If I could get everyone to turn off their phones, Auntie Glendra. That would be great. For those visitors wearing lanyards, you need to return those. It's not a souvenir. And there are a number of bathrooms that are gender neutral. One behind, I don't know where that one is. Men's are out the back. The Commission will be taking photos today and filming, so if you don't want to be filmed or recorded, please let Commission staff know. And the recording will be made available next week, I think. Can also let you know that we have had the Auslan interpreters cancel at the last minute, but have a hearing loop available for those that need it. I've been told that the recording of the event will have interpreting and captioning added. The fire exits, should we need them, are located on either side of the lifts. And is that all the boring stuff, I think? So before we get started, I'd like to hand over to Brendan Kerrin, a cultural representative and respected leader from the Metropolitan Aboriginal Land Council, to provide a welcome. Thanks, Brendan.
Thank you. Yama, Noi, Wurda, Yo, and Budjari Gamarua. Hello in 5 different languages. Not bad, eh? Can say goodbye in them languages too. And a few other things. Welcome to country. Still haven't educated. We've had to welcome the country. Still haven't educated who we are. When are we going to get out of the label and pigeonhole of being them? When? Since day one of colonisation, we're them. We don't even have control over our own narrative. We don't have control. When are we going to get our power back? We're not going to be able to tell our stories. We tell our stories, but majority of Australians told us to shut up. Majority told us to shut up. I was born and bred here in Sydney, lived here my whole life. I've seen a lot. Seen a lot of changes. Been through a lot as well. We're always making changes, but only little. I was just talking to a brother there this morning, and I said, you know what, I'm sick of asking. I've had enough of asking. I'm now taking, and I'm telling. Because that's where I'm at. We have our Reconciliation Week, we all celebrate, I do so many events, and what for? What's it ever done for us? I personally feel like we've just been kicked. I've been kicked after kicked after kicked after kicked. The referendum, I didn't think I was going to get up anyway. What a waste of time. Why do we need to have a vote on being equal? Why? Because we're not part of the collective. We're them. That's them. And then I sat back and saw the massacre at Bondi, and I watched the government move mountains for that community. We've had 500 brothers and sisters dead in custody. Another kicking. I took that as another kicking. How much more are we going to cop? I just got to let this off my chest. I'm sorry, but truth telling. It is what it is. And then my children, I've experienced things over the last few years I hadn't seen since I was a child regarding racism. I now have a fear for my children as well. That fear. I haven't had that since I was a kid. And I'm the second generation of my family, part of the kidnapped generation. Their narrative, our own narrative, we weren't stolen, we were kidnapped. Kidnapped. Our families, my parents, my aunties, they were sent to training camps with fluffy names. Cootamundra Girls Home, Kinchilla Boys Home. These were training camps. So I think one of the things that really hit home for me was nearly 50%, 60% of all women that went through Cootamundra became pregnant after being sent out to white families to work. 50, 60% became pregnant. They're living it. We're living it. I'm living it. Most of us are living it. I'm living it every day. Never met my mother. Never met my mother. It took me a long time of education and self-awareness to be able to come to where I am today. Because I've been the angry black fella. No one listens. I've been that angry black fella, full of alcohol, cutting loose. People just put their fingers in the ear. So I've had to work out how to actually communicate in a language where majority non-Indigenous communities can understand what I'm saying and where I'm coming from. But shouldn't it be the other way around? We're still having to change. Still having to change. And the welcome is a classic example of that. Why? Two types of people don't like a welcome, and I came to this conclusion because it stumped me for a long time. Why? What is the big deal? I have to sit there and watch the national anthem and get up and watch everyone sing proud and loud a national anthem. To have a reflection on the first two words of the sentences in the national anthem. But to welcome the country is the two types of people that don't like it, the racist and the uneducated. So I educate now on a welcome to country, still educating. And if they don't like it by the time I'm finished, then I know what box to put them in. And I always follow up and say, I'm more than happy, if you still don't like it, to have a cultural discussion with you in the car park when I'm finished. It just blows my mind. When we live on country, and we know, most of my countrymen know, we don't walk on each other's country unless we're welcome. Traditionally, you get yourself in a lot of trouble for doing that. There's evidence of that over at Narrabeen, the Narrabeen man, 20 to 30,000 years old, the world's oldest recorded homicide. He was a result of not being welcomed on the country. That's how serious it is. And the reason why it was so serious is because why would we allow strangers access to our family, our children, our wives, our aunties, our uncles, our family? Why would we let strangers just walk in? Take the front door off your house. That's what you're more or less saying. Take it off your house. That's what a welcome is. We traditionally welcome you to country. I need to know, who are you? Where have you come from? We still do that today. Who's your mob and where you come from? What are you doing here? What do you want? All right, now I'll tell you what food's available in our country. I'll tell you where our sites are you're allowed to visit and not allowed to visit, what I call our poison country, no-go zone. I'll show you where our sacred waters are you're allowed to drink from and not allowed to drink from. This is our totem. This is our law totem, our meat totem, our marriage totem. And here's where the toilet is. Everyone does that in their own house. And I don't understand why people don't understand this. Welcome to country. Why on earth would we invent it? Why? I'll tell you why. because we're them. We're them. We're not a part of the us, collective. We're different. I think about the time when we got our citizenship. You know what? If I was back in them days, I wouldn't have signed up for it. Because what difference has that made? Really? But it's always an honour for me to perform this ceremony and this custom of welcoming you to country. And the lands of the Grass Tree people. Songlines and stories are still running strong. Not just running, they're thriving. Thriving. Songline of Burra, the long-finned eel, swims from Parramatta into the harbour, goes all the way to Vanuatu, comes back. Songline. I remember when they were filling in the creeks over at Centennial Park, Burra was walking across the land, following the creek line to head down to Mascot and Lapa. And then from Lapa they go out to Vanuatu. Songline. Hyde Park, ceremonial ground. That was payback ceremony at Hyde Park. If you think about it, what infrastructure was placed directly on top of our infrastructure? So payback ceremony, they're having little walls in there, in Hyde Park. Let's build a war memorial. Conservatory music built directly on top of sacred Bora ground, directly on top. Bora ground, ceremony, singing, dancing. Let's build a conservatory of music on there. What infrastructure placed directly on top of ours? Gadigal are one of 29 clans. And it's, if you have a good think about this, I think there's about 59, maybe 60 clans within New South Wales. 29 of them live down here in the borders of the Hawkesbury, Nepean and the Georges River. The natural borders. On behalf of those Gadigal ancestors, on behalf of Wongal ancestors, on behalf of Camaragal, on behalf of Bidjigal, because of Wallamatigal, all this mob walked these lands. Gives me great honour to welcome you here this morning. Welcome to the lands and waters of the Gadigal. I'm just going to finish off by playing a song on the Yidaki. Here's another thing. Didgeridoo. It's not even an Aboriginal word. It's not an Aboriginal word. How it got its name is because of a song. When the first European heard this instrument, he heard a song. Didgeridoo, 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 didgeridoo. And he went, oh, that's called a didgeridoo. He's a very clever man. He saw these things next. He said, I know what they're called. They're called tapping sticks. Very clever man. Same man that named Manly. I'd just like to finish off by playing Welcome Song also on the Yidaki. It's not from here. It's not a traditional instrument. It only comes from the top ends. I'd like to pay my respects to my brothers and sisters, my aunties, uncles, my elders, past, present and emerging. And I always extend that to everyone else and your elders. The only difference between us is our language. It's the only difference. Once again, welcome, and thank you for having me. I've got to run. Got to pay a white fella by the name of Wilson for parking on my land. Thank you, brother.
Thank you, Brendan, for that welcome. Really appreciate that and your words. I'd also like to acknowledge the Gadigal people and acknowledge their elders, past and present, for their ongoing custodianship. I acknowledge the many Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples who have made an important contribution to this land and community and to all people joining us today. I would like to now ask Anna Cody, the Acting President of the Australian Human Rights Commission, to make some opening remarks. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Lyndon, and thank you also to Uncle Brendan for that welcome to country, and also for your patience and your anger and your willingness to continue to educate me as a non-Indigenous person. That I recognise your generosity of spirit in continuing to do that. And I also begin by acknowledging the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation and pay my respects to elders past and present, and also to all of you First Nations people here for your strength, your vision, your determination. I especially acknowledge Social Justice Commissioner Katie Kiss, my comrade in arms, and all of you, and particularly the family of Tara Apps, Michelle and Terry, who are here today. Wanted to particularly recognise your presence, and all the aunties, family of my Commissioner comrade Katie Kiss. There is great leadership and knowledge in this room, and we are so lucky to have you here at the Commission, and I'm welcoming you here as Acting President, but otherwise I am the Sex Discrimination Commissioner. It's an honour to be here today at the launch of the Fair and Just Future for First Peoples Social Justice Report 2025. I congratulate Commissioner Kiss and all of the team on the huge amount of dedication and care, the years of work that have gone into producing this report. I had the privilege of attending one of the consultations held as part of this work, and it was a powerful experience to hear the ongoing challenges that First Nations people experience, and hearing them speak truthfully about your lives and to witness your strength and your courage. Those voices are at the heart of this report, and they also show us, they tell us, and they show us how we can move forward together and create real change. And at its core, the report reminds us, and here at the Human Rights Commission, it's important that we are reminded that the rights of First Peoples are fundamental to human rights in Australia. A rights-based system benefits us all. And as reflected in the report, when social structures reflect diverse values and worldviews, they become more inclusive, more effective and fair for all of us. The report also recognises the many Aboriginal community-controlled organisations that are already leading the way, showing us how. You know what works because you're grounded in community. But the way governments work with these organisations needs to change. Funding, decision-making processes need to be better to support community leadership rather than limit it. And communities, we need to have you leading us and to be properly backed in doing this. The report sets out 25 recommendations and offers a clear pathway to centre First Peoples' rights in the development and implementation of policies that affect you. And I call on the government to act on these recommendations. In the words of Commissioner Kiss, this report calls on governments, institutions, and all of us here in Australia to listen, to act, and walk with First Peoples in genuine partnership. We're being offered another generous invitation, and we need to meet it with commitment, with respect, and with meaningful action. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. I've had the privilege of knowing Katie Kiss for many years now and working alongside of her in a couple of different settings. So I'm very proud to be able to welcome the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Social Justice Commissioner, Katie Kiss, to present her inaugural report.
Thank you, Lyndon, for your introductory remarks and for all the support and expertise you and Jumbunna have provided me and my team. And Lyndon has been my boss in a number of different iterations of my life, so and also my colleague and friend, so thank you. Was also front and centre on the dance floor at my 40th, so. Thank you, Uncle Brendan, for your educational, truthful and beautiful welcome to the unceded Gadigal lands. I pay my respects to your elders who are looking after us all here today on what always was and always will be Aboriginal land, and I extend that respect to all of our elders across the many nations of First Peoples spanning this great continent. On the back of our acting President's comments welcoming you all to the Commission today, I'd like to welcome all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people gathered here today, and also extend that sentiment to all non-Indigenous people who've come to mark this occasion. I thank you for your support. I would specifically like to acknowledge my family here today, my Auntie Kathy, my birth mum's sister, and now matriarch of our family, my foster mum, Harriet, who's had me since I was about 12 years old, and we're still very much a part of that extended family. My partner, Gregory, who's up the back there. My children and grandchildren all live in Queensland. Go Queensland. But they couldn't be here today. It's in jobs like this that, you know, we tend to neglect our families because we're travelling around the country non-stop. But this is while we're working to solve the challenges that impact our people more broadly, and that includes them. I acknowledge the support each of them and their partners have given me since taking up this role. In acknowledging my family, I also want to acknowledge my village that helped to raise me, but also that continue to support me. I've got a little group that I'm surrounded by. We call ourselves the Village People. I won't let you know who's in that group, but they're my support network, my buffer. I pay my respects to my grandparents, on both sides. For those who saw the Living Black interview, I have a non-Indigenous grandma, and I also have my First Nations grandparents, Nana and Pop, Katie and Reggie Dodd, who have led by example in all aspects of their lives, proud in their culture and identity, staunch in their conviction and fight to secure rights, and compassionate to anyone who needed love, care and support despite the restrictions that they lived under. They are my guiding light. I acknowledge with the deepest respect, sorry for all these acknowledgements, I know you're going to be standing up for a while, but I need to do this. I acknowledge with the deepest respect those who held this role before me. Emeritus Professor Mick Dodson AM, the first Commissioner appointed to this role, Dr. Bill Jonas, who is the only Commissioner that I didn't get to work with, Professor Tom Calma AO and Mick Gooder, two Commissioners under whom I had the privilege to serve in my former policy roles at the Commission, and June Oscar AO, who I worked with for a number of years prior to her commencing as the first female Commissioner and most recent appointment to the role before me. I acknowledge our senior community leaders in the audience today, government representatives, those working for our people in our organisations, Commissioners and former Commissioners and other dignitaries here today. Finally, I'd like to acknowledge also the Federal Attorney General, the Honourable Michelle Rowland MP, and the Honourable Senator Malarndirri McCarthy, Minister for Indigenous Australians. Although they are not able to be here in person today, Minister McCarthy has provided a video message along with former Commissioner Tom Calma, which will be played following this address. Again, you'll be standing up for a little while, so apologies for that. Thank you all for coming to celebrate the launch of my first social justice report, A Fair and Just Future for First Peoples. It's now a little over 2 years since I was appointed to the role of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Social Justice Commissioner in April 2024. I have three key functions under the Australian Human Rights Commission Act 1986. They are to monitor the exercise and enjoyment of human rights by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, to promote discussion, awareness and respect for the rights of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and to examine policy and legislation to assess whether they recognise and protect the rights of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. In addition, I also have a responsibility under Section 209 of the Native Title Act to report to the Federal Attorney General about the operation of the Native Title Act and its impact on the exercise and enjoyment of rights of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. It is with the utmost respect for my ancestors, my elders and mentors, and my predecessors, a sense of duty to those whom I serve, and a deep conviction for the principles the role was designed to uphold, that I have undertaken this role. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples have lived on this country for millennia. Through culture and connection to country, we maintain stable societies and flourishing communities. Racial violence and discrimination have undermined and interrupted this existence. To quote a Jumbunna report, poverty and disadvantage did not fall from the sky. They are the result of colonial processes over centuries which have targeted and continue to keep Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in a particular unequal social and economic position. The human rights framework that has developed since 1948 has and continues to provide a pathway to a better future. As the former Social Justice Commissioner, Professor Mick Dodson AM once stated, human rights do not dispossess people. Human rights do not marginalise people. Human rights do not cause poverty and they do not cause life expectancy gaps. It is the denial of those rights that is the largest contributor to these things. Over 3/4 of a century since the establishment of the United Nations and over 3 decades on from the establishment of the Social Justice Commissioner role, our peoples are still denied justice in this country. Australian government representatives have stated on the international stage that the protection and promotion of human rights is an essential component of a rules-based global order upon which lasting peace, security, freedom and dignity for all depend. Our governments have voluntarily ratified treaties that enshrine these rights, in doing so assuming a legal obligation to implement them through domestic measures and legislation compatible with their treaty obligations. Yet over the course of decades, they have continually failed to summon and sustain the political will to do so. The result is that in the world of today, Australia's lack of a national human rights framework or a National Human Rights Act has left it an outlier among Western liberal democracies. This report, A Fair and Just Future for First Peoples, sets out a blueprint for a future where Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples can fully and freely exercise and enjoy their human rights, and where they are supported by systems that uphold self-determination, dignity and equality. Because it is only through affirming rights that we will ever close the gap. As Professor Dodson stated, decades of research involving Indigenous peoples in the United States and Canada makes it plain that communities facing serious long-term disadvantage can and will take responsibility for sorting out problems if they are in a position to make decisions that will be respected and supported. As this report and the annual reports of the Close the Gap campaign, which I co-chair, all attest, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and organisations are leading and implementing incredible work across the country. Community-led solutions continue to deliver progress despite structural and systemic barriers. However, without comprehensive rights-affirming structures and protections, these initiatives have seldom delivered their full potential. Instead, they have struggled under the counterweight of the systemic harms that surround them, and they have been subjected to constant risk of disestablishment. The 25 recommendations in A Fair and Just Future for First Peoples provide a pathway for governments to move beyond rights ritualism and rhetoric, to act with integrity and to ensure strength, courage and determination of First Peoples is met with enabling rather than disabling structural reform and genuine accountability. In addition to those who contributed their input through the Informing the Agenda project, I'd like to thank my team and all those at the Commission and beyond who supported the production of this report. In recognition of the work that's gone into it, I acknowledge our drafters who supported community consultation and engagement, and those who spent time editing and proofing. I'm going to call out everyone's name, and if you're here, please put your hand up. Nick Devereaux, Tara Apps, Libby Gunn, Darren Dick, Kirsten Gray, Samantha Nolan-Smith, Darren, put your hand up. Cecilia Anthony, Daryl Rigney, Alison Vivian, Paul Gray, Linique Lawson, Gemma Sentence, Shiloh Villaflor, Shauna Pope, Alison Campbell, Alexandra Stafferton, Eli Sear, James Thompson, Kirsten Barnett, Luke Ryan, Melanie Houston, Noah Reisnum, Roberta Davies, Ruby Mountford, Sarah Waterhouse, Shaimaka Pelagama, Sophie Adler, Talia Heiniger, Sharon Wong, Sophia Mooney, and Commissioner Robert Fitzgerald, who I know is in today, I'm not sure he's in the audience, and Commissioner President Hugh de Kretser. I'd also like to thank Lani and John Bolzen, who created the beautiful artwork Gathering for Truth, Treaty and Transformation, which supported both the Informing the Agenda project, and now it appears on the cover and features throughout the report. You can read about the artwork and the artist on pages 4 to 6. John did the painstaking work of designing each of the report's 492 pages. I know it's heavy, I know it's going to be hectic in your luggage. It was 800 pages, we got it down to 5, so I'm grateful for that. Thanks also to Claudia, our internal comms person, who provided invaluable advice on the design process and assisted with the accessibility requirements. And of course, our comms team, in particular Gina and Omar, who've been working to get me ready for today. The report is dedicated to the life and legacy of our friend and colleague, Tara Apps, who tragically passed away in October last year, right in the middle of us producing this report. A strong, proud, Ngunnawal Wiradjuri woman, Tara's deep sense of personal and cultural identity defined her. Tara came across to us from the Productivity Commission to lead our engagements that would inform the agenda across my term as Commissioner. Tara was unwavering in her commitment to elevating the voices of First Peoples, and she was absolutely insistent on ensuring that truth, respect, dignity, justice, and community leadership were centred in all that we do. This is reflected in Chapter 1 of the report, First Peoples' Voices Informing the Agenda. Tara played a lead role in the drafting of this chapter, and as you can see, she gave particular care to ensuring that in the absence of formal national structures to give voice to our people, their voices were given place and space here in this report. I miss our long conversations about what was wrong with the world and what was required to fix it. For both of us, ensuring that system structures and the world our children and grandchildren are forced to navigate meets their needs and is set up to enable them to all that they can be, free from discrimination, harm and hate, was the end goal. I just want to share a story about Tara's passing and since. She was forced to be reckoned with, and at her burial, she knocked over the easel to make sure that we couldn't lay her to rest. Tara's parents were sharing with me last night that at her birthday celebration beside her gravesite, an earthquake happened. And then this morning, the minute Tara's mum's walked into the office here with a full cup of coffee, she gives me a hug and spills the coffee, and it splattered all over me. And Tara knew that I hated coffee. I hate the smell of coffee, and now all I can smell on myself is coffee. So Tara has made sure that her presence is here and that I will remember her all day today because all I can smell is Tara's presence on me. I want to acknowledge the significant contribution Tara made to bringing this report into the world and to thank Tara's parents, Michelle and Terry, for being here with us today. I know how proud and happy Tara would have been that you are here to see the launch of a piece of work in which she so wholeheartedly believed and invested. The development of this report was underpinned by the nationwide engagements I conducted with our communities across the country under the Informing the Agenda project. Funded by the National Indigenous Australians Agency, the ITA project was conducted over 10 months spanning 2024 to 2025. We conducted a survey, we received submissions and held 41 engagements across all states and territories. All in all, approximately 1,600 people provided input to the ITA project, and their voices have informed this report. Each voice was unique, but there were clear common experiences and concerns. From the disappointment in the voice referendum outcome to the increased exposure to interpersonal, systemic and structural racism, to the impacts of these things on our people, our children and our future generations. Let me share with you some of what we heard. These are all direct quotes from participants. Access to country is access to culture. Access to culture is access to language and stories and the ability to pass those on. Indigenous peoples, sovereign people of our respective countries, deserve a voice and much more. The voice could signify a collective will to honour the sovereignty and self-determination of Indigenous peoples. After the referendum, Indigenous issues just vanished from the conversation. We can't escape it. Racism is everywhere, even in sport. Progressing voice, treaty and truth and the goals of the Uluru Statement of the Heart remain relevant and key to improve outcomes for our peoples. Truth-telling and historical acceptance is key to reconciliation in Australia. Historical acceptance means that all Australians recognise and understand and accept the wrongs of the past and the impact of these wrongs on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples still felt today. Poverty is a big one. We're supposed to live in one of the richest countries in the world, yet our mob live in third world conditions that has to be addressed. There is no focus on the structures driving these problems. Instead, blame is placed on the affected individuals. We are the lived experience experts with the ability to provide an analysis of the oppressions that are being faced by our community, and our voices are crucial in shaping policies. Transforming government is critical to closing the gap and achieving better outcomes for First Nations community. Governments must share power, invest in communities and follow through on their promises. We haven't seen shared decision making. Funding agreements don't meet the needs of our communities. Native title is still part of their system. It still prioritises colonial rights over traditional law and custom. How do we hold Australian institutions accountable? There must be consequences for non-compliance. We need to use what resources, legislation and international agreements available to support our case for positive change. We must stop politicians from politicising our youth, women and men for their own political agendas. The key findings of the report span 8 chapters across 500 pages, including a chapter on the outcomes of the Informing the Agenda project, which has also been produced as a standalone document, a second chapter outlining a comprehensive blueprint for change, and 6 thematic chapters covering First Peoples participation, the full enjoyment of rights by First Peoples, systemic integrity and accountability, rebuilding the village, justice for First Peoples and land justice. Key messages include that we are still here and we are rights holders. The 2023 referendum has not changed that. Australian governments have a duty to deliver justice to our people and to country in accordance with these rights. We hold the solutions and we will not be silenced. First Peoples must be able to participate fully and freely in decisions that affect us. There must be genuine mechanisms to hold governments and corporations to account. Rebuilding relationships within Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities and between First Peoples and non-Indigenous Australians must be based in truth and affirmed through agreement making. There is no other way. We've seen a number of key developments between 2024 and 2026. Over the past 2 years, we've seen successful progress against 4 key Closing the Gap targets, but failure to track against Closing the Gap priority reforms and the establishment of an independent accountability mechanism, as well as the 15 targets, including 4 which are worsening. There have been important wins for voice, treaty and truth in a minority of states, including the passing of Australia's historic first treaty legislation in Victoria, underpinned by the Yurok Justice Commission statewide truth-telling process. But erosion of First Peoples representation and the disestablishment of truth and treaty processes in Queensland and the Northern Territory. We've seen the establishment and appointment of a National Commissioner for Aboriginal Children and Young People, who I note is in the audience today, but at the same time borne witness to flagrant contempt, disregard or obstruction of human rights obligations by a number of jurisdictions in relation to children and young people. Australia has continued its high level of engagement with international human rights structures and has contributed financially to the operation of a UN system facing financial crisis. Despite all this, the voluntary pledges Australia has made as part of its 4th Universal Periodic Review were extremely conservative, and the government has held back on progressing key rights initiatives back home, such as the Human Rights Act and a National Action Plan to implement the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Both of these initiatives are key recommendations of the National Anti-Racism Framework, commissioned by the government. This framework was finalised 2.5 years ago. The government is yet to adopt or act on it, even amid escalating racism experienced by First Peoples before and since the Voice referendum, and its extreme and sickening manifestation in the attack on Camp Sovereignty and the attempted massacre at Boorloo on Survival Day earlier this year. Finally, while there have been some very positive results in the courts, such as the ruling in Commonwealth versus Yunupingu and a highly innovative government-commissioned Australian Law Reform Commission review into the Native Title Act's Future Acts regime, we've also seen increased use of UN complaints processes due to the lack of domestic remedies and dismissive responses to UN Treaty Committee rulings on complaints brought against Australia. It's clear that despite the positive initiatives that are afoot, serious reforms are needed if we are to shift the overall trajectory to one of improvement, and the report's recommendations don't shy away from this reality. Its calls include independent national mechanisms for participation, truth-telling and agreement-making, including a National Human Rights Act and full implementation of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and the National Anti-Racism Framework. Stronger accountability structures, including independent oversight and accountability mechanisms for closing the gap targets and deaths in custody, transparent data and an urgent shift to longer-term needs-based funding. Protection and expansion of community-led initiatives and culturally safe services. increased and sustained investment into practices that restore cultural authority and promote nation-building, good governance and community-facing accountability. Restorative justice approaches that promote dispute resolution and peacemaking. Language revival programs, including in the Torres Strait, cultural camps and healing forums, intergenerational learning on country, and knowledge transfer and mentoring. Criminal justice reforms, including raising the age of criminal responsibility that bans solitary confinement for children and give detainees access to Medicare and the PBS. And comprehensive land justice reform in partnership with First Peoples and aligned with international human rights standards. A fair and just future for First Peoples in Australia is possible. The evidence in the report shows the innovation, strengths and success of solutions created by First Peoples to address problems affecting their communities. Governments must demonstrate meaningful action through collaborating with First Peoples and to uphold the dignity, courage and determination of First Peoples with structural reform, genuine accountability and integrity. I've requested a formal response, public and timely response by the Australian Government to the report's recommendations, and it's my hope that as a step towards better accountability, this request will be met. A fair and just future for First Peoples has also been submitted to the United Nations Special Rapporteur, Dr. Albert Barame, who will conduct a country visit to Australia later this year and will produce a country report on the status of Indigenous people's rights in Australia. Please help yourselves to the copies of the report and the community guide that are on the tables in the centre. They're also available online. But I want to thank you all for being here today. I look forward to working with you all in creating a fair and just future for First Peoples. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and congratulations on providing such an important State of the Union report. State of the Union, State of the Nation, maybe. I might have been your boss, but I never dared tell you what to do. Can I also offer our thoughts to Tara's parents, Michelle and Terry. The Jumbunna team worked very closely with Tara and admired her passion and tenacity for everything she did. It's great to see her spirit reflected in the report. We'll now play a video presentation by the Honourable Indigenous Affairs Minister, or the Indigenous Affairs Minister, the Honourable Malarndirri McCarthy, to offer her reflections on today's launch.
Hello everyone, it's Malarndirri McCarthy here, coming to you from the lands of the Ngunnawal people. As a proud Yanyuwa and Gadigal woman, I acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation and pay my respects to elders past and present. Established in 1993, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Social Justice Commissioner role was born from the Royal Commission into Aboriginal Deaths in Custody. Prime Minister Paul Keating answered the calls from our people that enough was enough and that we needed to see change. From the very first Commissioner, Professor Mick Dodson, the Commissioner has asked the difficult questions. They've shone a light on places once ignored. They've forced difficult conversations where people have not wanted to have them. Katie Kiss walks in those footsteps and does so with the fierce determination of those who came before her. As First Nations people, we know that progress on our rights is hard won. We know that struggle has been multifaceted and has required a broad movement. Your report today forms part of that continuation. This report is informed by a national listening tour, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people across the country talking about the issues facing their families, their communities, and the solutions they consider necessary to improve outcomes. It sets out a future where Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people can fully exercise and enjoy their rights, and where they are supported by systems that uphold self-determination, dignity and equality. The report also identifies areas of concern and calls for government focus and support. These areas include health, justice, child protection, housing and land. We are now 5 years away from many Closing the Gap targets. Through the Joint Council on Closing the Gap, I'm working with states and territories to push for stronger action. This year's Closing the Gap plan shows the Commonwealth is delivering action on a number of fronts: more jobs, greater food security, safer housing, better health infrastructure, and more wellbeing support. We are delivering critical investments in these areas. We're ensuring the rights of First Nations children and young people are protected through the establishment of the National First Nations Children's Commissioner. We've secured $3.9 billion National Access to Justice Agreement, the biggest single Commonwealth investment in legal assistance. And funding to critical First Nations family violence prevention, legal services supporting women and children has more than doubled. We are taking action to ensure First Nations women and children are safe through boosting funding for family violence prevention and legal services, and launching the long called for Our Ways, Strong Ways, Our Voices, a standalone plan to end violence against First Nations women and children, with an immediate funding injection of $218 million for critical frontline services. There is dedicated funding under Round 3 of the Housing Australia Future Fund to support more than 21,000 new social and affordable homes with a First Nations tenancy target of 10% and delivery through the community-controlled sector. Community-led approaches will help us achieve stronger outcomes for our people and communities. The Commonwealth is supporting the aspirations of our families, elders and communities, but we need all governments to meet their responsibilities. This report is an important call to action. It shows us where we need to do better, but also how we can move forward. I'm committed to continuing this work with respect, with partnership, and with a focus on real change. Together we can build a fair and just future for First Peoples. Yo, Boji Butter.
Thank you, Minister. And now for someone who has launched a couple of these reports himself, we're going to play a clip from Professor and former Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Social Justice Commissioner Tom Calma AO.
Hi, I'm Tom Calma, the third Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Social Justice Commissioner from 2004 to 2010. I am a human rights devotee and I'm honoured to be invited by Commissioner Kiss to share some thoughts today. A big shout out to our Human Rights Commission colleagues, some of whom have tirelessly served us for close to 3 decades, and during that time they have mentored myself and other commissioners and grown the nation's human rights knowledge, capability and increased our human rights advocacy capacity. I apologise that I cannot join you in person today, but this afternoon I'm appearing before a Parliamentary Joint Standing Committee inquiring into racism, hate and violence directed at Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. I'm coming to you from Ngunnawal country and pay my respects to elders past and present, and also to recognise our youth, who will be our future leaders, the custodians of our stories, our cultures, our histories and our languages. And we must all focus on our youth in all the work that we do. I also recognise the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, on whose country this launch is happening today. Now, while this is Katie's first social justice report, her fingerprints and wordsmithing are found on numerous social justice reports over the 8 years she worked as the Director at the Commission. She was, in fact, the Director of the Social Justice Unit when I was the Social Justice Commissioner. One of the defining features of our time is the growing political polarisation we are witnessing across many democratic nations, including Australia. Around the world, we are seeing increased support for political movements that promise certainty, in uncertain times. These movements often emerge during periods of economic insecurity, social change and declining trust in institutions. Australia has not been immune. Rising housing costs, costs of living pressures, concerns about migration, changing demographics, the influence of social media and a growing distrust of governments, universities, media organisations and experts have created fertile ground for political movements that challenge established institutions and conventional policy approaches. Many Australians who support these movements are expressing genuine frustration. They want to be heard. They want economic security. They want confidence that governments are addressing their concerns. For me, this is ironic, as many of these same people potentially voted against the Voice referendum, where Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples were calling for a mechanism to assist government to better meet the needs of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. We wanted to work in partnership with government so that they could hear directly from us about issues and solutions that emanate from us. I mentioned this this afternoon earlier, that I'm participating in the racism inquiry that is long overdue. Fear, misinformation, scapegoating or hostility towards minority groups such as migrants, refugees, religious minorities and other historically marginalised groups, particularly Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, results in increased discrimination, racism and social division. Commissioner Kiss's first social justice report comprehensively covers racism, and it's based on what she heard from affected parties across the nation as she undertook her national listening tour that visited 43 discrete communities across Australia. Now, whilst these issues are perennial, I urge inquiry members to take the opportunity to read and action the recommendations of her report, as she also offers solutions and redressed from a multiple of perspectives and informed by a broad range of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. Commissioner Kiss has clearly articulated the content of her report, so I won't repeat them all in detail, but highlight a couple of the key topics. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander language programs that are so important, as we're about a third of the way through the International Decade of Indigenous Languages for the period 2022 to 32, that is intended to draw global attention on the critical situation of Indigenous languages. As the longest continuing surviving cultures in the world, we have much to celebrate and much to mourn post-colonisation, including the decimation, and this is mourning, the decimation of our Indigenous languages. Language, culture, well-being, hope and pride are all integral to the prosperity of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. We are a young population who are vulnerable in our own country. We endure poor health, poor education outcomes, racism, overcrowded jails, employment challenges, family separation and child removals, and housing non-availability that results in multiple generations living under the same roof in overcrowded housing with limited prospects. That said, we are seeing greater participation in all levels of education, but we don't have an influential voice or mechanism to meaningfully assist government to implement changes under our directions, changes and solutions that we know will work if we're given the opportunity to implement them in a culturally safe way that meets our needs and is developed and that are developed and controlled by us. The failed Voice referendum was a lost opportunity, and the inaccurate and dishonest reporting on Indigenous issues is jaundicing the views of many in the community. Moves to address social media misreporting are welcomed, but too often it is a case of too little, too late. Katie's reporting on these issues is timely and informed by the community, but we know that comprehensive reform of all relevant policies and legislation is needed and must be informed by and in compliance with the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, respond to the lived experience of First Peoples in their communities, and be undertaken in partnership with and with the full participation of First Nations peoples. Notwithstanding, as Commissioner Kiss wrote, these are not new issues. They are long-standing rights that have too often been denied or delivered in ways that fail to meet the needs, strengths and aspirations of our First Peoples. In closing, let me reiterate that the failure of the 2023 referendum on the voice to Parliament does not mean that the need for representative structures is any less pressing. Indigenous-led solutions work. Governments must follow our lead if they are to realise a fair and just future for First Peoples. This can be achieved through essential steps including a National Human Rights Act, a United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples implementation plan to be able to embed it into domestic policy, and the implementation of the National Anti-Racism Framework. A rights-based system benefits all Australians. When social structures reflect diverse values and worldviews, including those, and importantly those, of First Peoples, they become more inclusive, effective and fair for everyone. Embedding enforceable human rights in our domestic law improves accountability and, consequently, trust in our social systems and governments. And this leads to a more cohesive society where everybody feels included and respected. Congratulations, Commissioner Katie Kiss, on a great first report, with many more to come, I'm sure. You fill us with pride and we walk with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom, for your words. Can I get one more round of applause for Commissioner Kiss and her inaugural report? That brings us to the end of the formalities, but please stick around. I understand there's light refreshments put on by the Commission, and yeah, hang around, have a yarn. Thank you.